I'm rich. She's 47. Oh, no, she's 26 years old. She's my sister. What?
She had several dysfunctions here.
She came down here with one guy, broke up. Oh, so it's tell one time. She got another new guy. She has a baby with him. The baby was like 16 months old. So. But I'm not doing. She lives in town. She applied. And now they bought a place out by John Deere. And I was still not sure they were bad and John Deere because the way she described it. You think it sounded like a little key. She was going to stay on the highway, but I was still on the other game. But she's told me, trying to in the country. You went to the road. You ready, Mary?
You know, I forgot to take my pills that lets me be on, that decongest my ears. I haven't taken them since this morning, so I may be ready or I may not. I'm ready. For those who can't read the board, page I would introduce you, but
Well, my name is Todd Reeder, and I'm the Director of Missions for South Kansas Baptist Association. And if you could all do me a favor, you all move right up here. That would be fantastic. So the presentation that I have tonight is one with a lot of slides, and it might be a little hard for you to read it from where you sit. So if you move a little bit closer, that'd be helpful. I think probably for all of us. Can I use this stand?
Yeah.
I'm gonna come down here closer to you. So Dave told me that he was gonna be gone, and, I sent out a message to all the pastors about, this presentation that I put together for, Trinity Baptist Church. They actually come and do a presentation on SBC, life, kind of the workings of that, also the state, also our association. And so that's my purpose, is to try to give some explanation to those three things. I'm not an expert in any of the three. I'm new in my position, and been in this position since February. And so I'm still learning some things about our association and about what I'm supposed to do. So I'm excited to be here and meet you guys and kind of put a face name. So I do want to share the slideshow with you. These first few slides that we have are actually from the SBC website, and so the first 2/3 of this is really from their website. We're going to give some explanation to the SBC. So I'll kind of give some nods to you to switch slides. So go ahead and go to the second one there. And we're going to talk about just navigating foundationally in the SBC. Go ahead and go to the next one too. So foundational definitions. And I don't know if we get this hard to read out there, so I'm just going to read that for you. So what is the SBC? What is the SBC? How many of you are from all the way back an SBC church, all the way to now? Back to the bowl, huh? Okay, all the way. All right. So, okay, yeah. So, now if we were to poll Sunday morning, do you think that'd be about the same, or do you think it'd be a little more all over the map?
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's been my experience whenever I've done membership interviews and things like that. People come from a variety of backgrounds, Catholic, Lutheran, Haley, all over the map. What I found in the church that I pastored, it was fairly rare to have somebody that had grown up and been through SBC life. And so I think part of what I want to try to help is just an understanding for those that maybe are novice in the SBC, but also to those that have been in the SBC their whole life and just don't know why we do things this way. And again, I'm not an expert in this. I didn't grow up in an SBC church. I grew up in an independent fundamental Baptist church. And so for the first 18 years of my life, I didn't know anything about the SBC at all. And so, again, I'm fairly new. Well, it's not anymore, I'm getting older. Because it's been most of my life now. Thinking back how long, no, actually, the SBC church is a lot longer than that. So, anyways, here we are. So some of this is going to be just review, and I do think some of it's going to be some new information. And some of it might feel kind of like fire hose, but if you want to talk to the rest of us, I can do that later. So the Southern Baptist Convention is a network of autonomous churches, and that's an important word, autonomous churches, as well as an annual gathering of representatives from cooperating churches who, three things, have organized a specific set of cooperating ministries with a defined set of ministry assignments. 2, annually select trustees to govern those ministry entities. And number 3, adopt a budget to help fund those entities through a cooperative giving model called Go Creative Cooperative Program. Okay? Go Creative. So go ahead and go to the next one. So from that, we go to foundational convictions. So the purpose of Southern Baptist Convention is to elicit, combine, and direct the energies of the Baptist denomination of Christians for the propagation of the gospel. And then the missional vision of that, of the Southern Baptist Convention, is to present the gospel of Jesus Christ to every person in the world and make disciples of all nations. It should sound very similar to the purpose of the local church, right? So the foundational convictions should reflect the foundational convictions of local churches, and that's what is really said there in those two statements. Now, our purpose comes from our convictions, and they are expressed in a document called Baptist Faith and Message. Are you familiar with that? Okay. Baptist Faith and Message. 2000 is the latest edition of that. So the Southern Baptists have summarized our convictions into the statement of faith, and this statement is really helpful in our participation together. From the resource, Navigating the SBC, this is one of them that they have available. It says this, it says the Baptist Faith Message represents the confessional consensus of certain defined doctrines that Baptists believe, cherish, and with which they have been and are now closely identified. So our statement of faith, it helps kind of guard us from wandering off into doctrinal and theological ditches that can swing in either direction, really, whether it be into legalism or into liberalism. So those foundational documents help us stay on the right track and cooperate well together. So understanding the Baptist Faith Message, it can be really helpful guide for us to guard each other and guard ourselves from making really damaging doctrinal and practical mistakes as churches. So in the news today, you're going to hear a lot about some of the Baptists and convention and things that's going on. There's 47,000, 46,000 Southern Baptist churches worldwide. And so those churches, all of those churches, are to give an agreement to that Baptist Faith Message. That's part of how we cooperate. That's the foundational document. So it is pretty important. Have you guys ever done a study through the Baptist Faith Message? You know one? Somewhere?
We did look under Dell.
Yeah, Lifeway has produced a new Sunday school material, kind of walk through that. If you'd be interested in doing that sometime, it's a pretty well together Sunday Sunday school material. Now, go to the next one. So our scope, the scope foundationally. So no two churches are alike. And you know this from your own personal experiences. People are alike. But there are certain commonalities that bind Southern Baptists together, regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, language, size, or location. So the scope of the Southern Baptist is very large. There's 47,000 churches. No two churches are alike. They're not alike in a lot of different ways, as maybe you've experienced. But there are certain things that are identifiers of a Southern Baptist church, or at least should be for that. So go ahead and go to the next two slides there. The next one. So the convention assigns and conducts its work through 11 ministry entities, 2 mission boards, 6 seminaries, an ethics and religious liberty commission, a publishing ministry, and a financial resource service ministry, and its executive committee. Now, moving to the next one, each of these ministry entities exists for the express purpose of assisting churches in the goal of advancing the gospel. That is the purpose of our convention, our cooperation together, is to get the gospel message of Jesus out in the world. So go to the next one, and here's just some logos of these entities that are part of the Southern Baptist. So we have the International Mission Board, we have the North American Mission Board, or IMB, or NAM for short, for those two. Guidestone is the financial service, and then Lightweight, which used to be the Sunday school board back in the day. So those are those four. Go to the next one, and we have the seminaries. 6 seminaries that we have that are funded out of the Popular program. And so Gateway Seminary, which is in California, used to be in San Francisco, they moved recently. New Orleans, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is in Louisville, Kentucky. Midwestern, which is there in Kansas City. Southeastern, which is in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then Southwestern, which is Dallas-Fort Worth area. Okay. And then the next slide, we have the ERLC, or the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, the SBC Executive Committee, and then the WMU, which is the Women's Missionary Union, which is the sole auxiliary of the SBC. There's not another one, that's the only one there. So those are the organizations that kind of fall under the umbrella of the SBC. Now, go to the next slide. So the relationship of entities to the local church. This is really important. In the SBC, again, that word autonomous is really important to all of us, how we think. So some think that the Southern Baptist Convention is a top-down organization. However, each local church is fully autonomous and retains its full authority. Now, I've been to, I was at the convention this year in New Orleans, and then 2 years ago in Nashville. And things that get published by the media about what happens at the convention, they are writing some of those things from a vantage point that is really more American in mindset, really at all how the SBC operates and functions. So we have a president of the SBC, which is elected every year. Usually it's only allowed back-to-back terms. So whenever people hear from the news that, well, we elected a new president, they think the same way that when we elect the president of the United States, they have all kinds of authority, all kinds of power. That's not at all what happens in the SBC with the president. And it goes back to the autonomy of the local church and the full authority that you have as a local church, and how important it is. And so it's not a top-down organization, it's really a bottom-up, or just flip that upside down. And that's how it works. So go to the next slide, and this kind of gets a little bit better of an explanation, and again, that's hard to read up there. So what's reality in the SBC is this, is that there's This says 50,000 local churches, it's more like 47,000, I think. So local churches and congregations, they're probably including some mission work and things in that number. So each local church or congregation chooses for itself to cooperate with various Baptist bodies. That's that whole collaboration that we're doing. And so underneath that, at the bottom there says Southern Baptist Convention comprises of 11 administrative committees, executive committee, WMU. These are some of those functions. But then at the top of that, you see that there's affinity groups, and fellowships, there's associations, right out here, that, and then also state conventions. But again, it all flows out of the center of that. So it's the local church, and the importance of local churches is really the battle cry of the SBC, how important the local church really is. Go to the next slide, and it is, again, but what you have over there on the left, it's the election of the SBC president. At the top of that, which you can't really see on that slide, that projector, it says messengers from local churches. So you might be able to see little churches that are up there representing. So at a convention, what happens is every church is given the opportunity to send messengers, representatives from their church that have voting rights and raise the ballots, write on ballots, and to one, elect a president, which then goes on to give nomination to these committees and other things. But other things come up during the convention. So the convention is made up of messengers from the local churches. Has anybody been to a convention before? SBC convention? Okay. Well, maybe after today, we can move forward. It is a very important thing to do. It's a helpful thing for your church and for the information that comes back to your local church from you, not from some other source. So that's pretty important. So this kind of gives a flow chart into kind of the workings of whenever a president is elected, and he then gives appointments to these other individuals, other committees, just as in most of our Baptist churches, we have a lot of committees. And that's kind of how this all plays itself out. And then there's nominating committees that help do other nominations to the rest of the things that can happen with these other agencies in the SBC. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And how do you maximize your voice? Well, the way it happens is 2 days in June, and really the convention, a little bit more than that, because it takes about a whole week. But there's 2 days of actually business sessions that take place. And so what you can do as a messenger to make your church's voice known, your own personal voice known, is to go and to make motions, to vote on and or amend resolutions. And there's a process of all this that you should do ahead of time, because I've seen so many people try to give an amendment, a resolution. They didn't follow proper rules and gets dismissed. So the elected commission officers elect SBC committees and trustee boards and entity reports. So as you go, you listen to these things, you participate in this, what you are doing is showing that your church, having the local autonomous authority of your church, and you need to express that into this larger meeting. I think at this year's New Orleans convention, I think there was 13,000 people in attendance, I think, that were registered messengers from our churches. And now in the past, we go back through other convention attendance, there's been 47,000 people that have attended. That was back in the mid-90s, when some of that was happening. So you have a voice that you can share, but again, there is some process of things. So your church has to send in who those representatives will be, who those messengers will be. And then your registration show up, and you pack your stuff, you're voting. So go to the next slide, it's kind of connected to this one as well. So the rest of the year, so outside of those 2 days, what else do you do to maximize your voice? Well, they get three specific ways to be involved. And that is to serve on a board or a committee, and you can do that at the national level, you can do that at the state level, you can do that at the association level as well. You can nominate someone to serve on a board or a committee, which is usually my favorite way to do things, is make somebody else do it, right? So usually whenever they don't show up to the meeting that they're supposed to be at, they get nominated, right? That's why you always show up. So, and the third thing, you share ideas and express concerns. And you do that at the local level, so your local church, you should be doing that. At the associational level, you should do that. State and even national level, there's channels in which to do that in all of those. And so that's a way to maximize your voice as well. And as a church, as an individual. Let's go to navigating cooperative. This is kind of really where everything starts to really click and makes a lot more sense. So why are we even doing this? So go to that next slide. So how does it work? Churches support the cooperative program by submitting contributions through a network of state and regional Baptist conventions. Go to the next slide. And this is the cooperative program. Again, they were really creating, they came up with this name. But this is the way in which this is devised a long time ago of how to reach the world. How do we together reach the world? So what you find over there on the left are individual church members. So you search with you. Now, individual church members gather together. They assemble and they make up a local church. There are certain things which you have said this defines who we are as a church. So churches have constitutional bylaws, they have church covenants. These are all things that help bind us together. So from church members, we have local churches. And then from those local churches, this then moves into state missions and ministries. And then that also then translates to Southern Baptist missions and ministries. So the cooperative program is the financial fuel for reaching every person for Jesus in every town, every city, every nation. But again, it starts on the left and moves to the right. So it's, again, not the other way around. This is really important how it all works. The next two slides talk about why you should, as a church, participate in the cooperative program. And I don't know what your church is for the cooperative program. A lot of times you'll hear in Southern Baptist world, they'll say CP, that just means cooperative program. And so they give here 6 reasons, and so I'll share them with you. The first, they say, CP allows your church to cooperate with like-minded churches to advance the Great Commission. Number 2, CP makes every church member a missionary. In the way of Cindy, right? Well, the Lord hasn't called all church members overseas. He has called all of us to pray for and financially support those who are full-time missionaries. Number 3, CP enables every church, no matter the size, to support Southern Baptist missionaries. Even the largest church can't support all the missionaries on their own. Now, I came from Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, and we try to do that. We try to support a lot of missionaries individually, and it was a very small amount that we can do for each of those missionaries. That is not at all how the cooperative program works. The fourth thing made of this is that your church's cooperative support supports state, national, and international missions. So it's not just siloed into one thing, it's spread out through all these different ways. Number 5, CP increases your church's awareness of mission causes. And so the things that which you should be getting from them, from the IFB, are prayer calendars and cards and things like that, videos, all these kinds of things to make you more aware of what's going on, where your money is going as well. And number 6, CP blesses your church. A host of free and low-cost resources comes to your church because of that CP giving. All right. Now let me give you a breakdown of kind of what this looks like. Go to that next slide. And so in 2022, 2023, the cooperative program budget was $192 million. 73.2% of that goes to World Missions Ministries. So the IMB, I'm having trouble reading that on my screen. The IMB receives 50.41% of that. And then North American Mission Board gets 22.79%. Then you see the next biggest one is the theological education, that's 22.16%, so all the seminaries are being funded out of that program. The next biggest one is 2.99%, which is the executive committee and SBC operating budget, which part of that is how the convention symbols and all the money it takes to put that on, and it comes out of that line as well. And then the last little sliver there, 1.65%, is the Christian ethics and religious liberties ministries. So that's basically what the breakdown looks like for that $192 billion of what 2022-2023 budget looks like. Okay, that's kind of the SBC world. Right? Any questions about that? No? Explain it perfectly. Great. Okay. That's good. Well, let's go to the state level. So the next slide here is KNCSB, or Kansas, Nebraska Convention of Southern Baptists, or they're currently going through a rebranding, and they're now, they call themselves Church Forward. It seems similar, but when all you've known is KNCSB, it's so I call them both. So Church Forward, KNCSB, is Kansas, Nebraska. The two states got together and formed their state convention, states convention. Other states have a whole lot more Southern Baptist churches than Kansas and Nebraska. Kansas and Nebraska, both are considered by North American Mission Board to still be pioneer states, because of how few Southern Baptist churches are actually in these two states. So you cross the line in Missouri, completely different story. Cross the line in Oklahoma, completely different story, right? Arkansas, completely different story. So that's why we have two states cooperating together to form one convention. So it consists of 12 local Baptist associations, so Southeast Kansas Baptist Association, one of those 12. And approximately 460 churches. So 460 churches across 4.837 million people in Kansas and Nebraska. If we were to really kind of work all that math out, we've got a lot of work to do. That's 460 churches. And so it's important for us to, one, as a local church, do the things we should be in evangelism and encouragement and guarding each other, sin, guarding our theology and doctrine. Like, these are all very important things because of the task that we have. So if you like to go to read it right there, the kncsb.org is the website. I'm going to change that to churchforward.org. So if you want more information, there's all kinds of stuff. Next slide. This is just kind of a breakdown of what's offered through Kansas, Nebraska. So first thing being, there's resource and there's networking that can happen in the convention of churches, which I'm involved in quite a bit. It's my job in trying to get churches connected and leaders connected through our state convention. That second thing, there's disaster relief. Anybody familiar with disaster relief or work with disaster relief?
No, but my parents did.
Okay, yeah. So you'll see the yellow hats and yellow shirts. That's the disaster relief team. Sometimes you'll see them on the news and a flood, a tornado, you see these people with yellow hats. Those are Southern Baptists that are doing that. And so that's connected to our state convention. And we have a state leader, Chuck Neese. I'll show you in a second. He's leader of that for Kansas and Nebraska. Third thing there is Webster Conference Center, that's in Salina. So there's Super Summer that happens there, there's conferences that are held there, other events that take place at Webster. That's also kind of managed by David Manor, our executive director at the state level. And then the fourth thing is the Kansas, Nebraska Southern Baptist Foundation. And they offer this fairly new thing that's started. They do estate planning, there's loans that are given to churches, associations, convention organizations. There's a ministry advised fund, which if a church has at least $25,000 to be managed, this is a pretty big deal because you're going to get a better return on that money. You let the advised fund, put that toward the advised fund. And I don't know what that number is, but it's far higher than a CD or something like that, what the return would be on that. And then endowment funds and grants and scholarships. So this is just a sampling of the things which Kansas Nebraska does. The next slide is the Church Forward Missions Offering, which is coming up in September and into August, which you might find it as BioWeb. It's a BioWeb Missions Offering. So what happens with this money as your church sends money to the state for this missions offering? Half of it is held by the state, the other half is sent back to the local association, to our association of churches. And it's intended for church planting, church revitalizations, other mission work that happens at the local level and state level. So that's the purpose of that fund. So 100% of that fund goes to the state or to the association for that specific purpose. That's how we use it. The next slide is just the leadership team. I don't know if people are anyways. Next slide is who I represent, the Southeast Kansas Baptist Association. So we are made up of, this is 39, but we're at 38, local churches. We're in 10 counties, exactly more like 12 counties that I cover. We'll be 2 counties that don't have any churches in. I would like to see that change. There's 160,000. What county don't have churches? Elk and Elk doesn't have a. In Allen County, there are some Baptist churches, but they're not in our association. They're actually connected to Flint Hills. And I don't know why. It's
Cherry Mint.
what's
Cherry Mint.
yeah. I'm not sure why it is. But, so if you look at the corner of Kansas, there's those 2 counties that I don't have churches in those 2 counties.
Are there Baptist churches in Southern Baptist churches? There is in Allen County.
There is in Allen. There's at least 2 that I know of in Iowa. But those are the only 2 that I know of in Allen County, or just in Iowa. And then in Elk County, there used to be, but I think the church closed. From what I was told. So in our little corner of Kansas, there's 160,000 people. And again, we have 38 Southern Baptist churches trying to reach these people. So you know how many people live in the interstate? 2,800. Yeah. How many churches are in the interstate? Just any church? Hundreds.
At one time, there were 16.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's down to 12 or 13.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess I should give you a little bit of background about myself. I was pastor at First Baptist in Independence. In Independence, I think before COVID, there was 46 churches in Independence. There's 8,700 people. And most of those 46 churches, I think that's pre-COVID, average less than 20 people in Independence. So whenever I give statistics numbers, I think it's important to realize that not all of those people are lost. There's a really big chunk of them that are. And I just want to use it as a motivator for us to see that's why cooperating together is one of the best ways to accomplish the mission that we have, as a task, basically. So as we pool together, we're a lot more effective, stronger to accomplish the mission. Our corner of Canada's, states, and national, international level. So go to the next slide. So, again, it's, but I want this to be clear. So no local churches means no association. We can also put this, the same thing being for Kansas, Nebraska. There's no local churches, there is no Kansas, Nebraska convention. There is no SBC if there are no local churches. So the health of our association depends upon the health of our local churches. Your church. It matters. It matters what happens. And so without participation and financial support, there's a universal recommendation in associations of minimum of 3% of undesignated gifts to the association. We have churches that can be a lot more than that for association, but we also have some that don't get anything for association, which is very representative of churches too, right? Might have 100 members, and we have maybe 20% that are actually making up the financial difference in the church. So it's fairly reflective of what's happening in local churches, what's happening in our association, what's happening in the state, what's happening in bigger SBC. So this is why the local health is so important, because it affects everything else. And so I'm quite passionate about the health of the local church and seeing that health being strengthened, being sustained, and from that health that we can start. I'm getting ahead of myself with some of the slides. Go to the next slide. These are just some things that we have in our association that maybe you're not aware of. We have Beer Baptist Camp in Beer, Kansas. So camps have just got completed. We have a new camp manager this year. His name's Garrett Newman. And Garrett's born and raised through Camp Weir. He is passionate about Camp Weir, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do. I think he's got a great heart for see that camp thrive. He's already doing a great job. A very good time with him already. Beautiful Peak Mission Trip, which should be an S on there because there's more than one now. Multiples. That goes down to the Fort Worth area, and the Touchton family out of Pittsburgh have been leading that for decades. And Touchton, he just passed away this year. Which is a huge loss to us, our association, to us in the state as well. He had such an impact with disaster relief also. Another thing that we have is our Mexico mission trip that kind of follows the back of the Beautiful Peak mission trip. That's the time of year. We have party trailers available with stuff for block parties, things like that. And then also we have disaster relief trailers and things that we also help with as an association. So, last two slides, then you can ask all kinds of questions. So as I got ahead of myself. So our partnership, it helps strengthen, sustain, and start churches in our local communities as we fulfill the Great Mission. And so I'm a Baptist and have to liberate Baptist pastor. No. So strengthen, sustain, start. 3 S's. Real simple, right? And I need to explain the second one, because sometimes we think, oh, sustain, that doesn't mean things like you're not really doing it. Well, everything is connected to first. And go to the next slide, and this will make a little more sense here. So as we talk about strengthening and what we should be doing as an association to see strength happen, it starts with pastors, it starts with church leaders, and it's also involving the congregation. Now, usually the health of the church is connected to the health of the pastor. If the pastor is not healthy, the church is not going to be healthy. And those can also work the other way as well. But what I would love to see is our churches have healthy pastors, healthy leaders, and healthy congregations. And it's from that strength and strengthening that happens that then we can, the second stage, that is sustaining. And how do we sustain strength? Well, if you've ever done any kind of exercise, and maybe you were, at the first of the year, you were just killing it, the first 2 months, you're doing great, and then you've been on vacation, and it all got wrecked, right? And so all that strength that you built, and maybe you went from those 5-pound dumbbells to those 15-pound dumbbells, and you were feeling great about yourself, and then just 2 weeks later, you're back at 5 pounds. Why? Because you didn't sustain the strength. You didn't keep pushing yourself and growing. And so that's what I want to encourage, is sustainable strength. Well, how do we do that? Well, it's through communication, things like this, right? It communicates to you, your pastor, communicates to you, you as messengers, with the state, with the association, with the national level, communicating to the church. It's also giving opportunities to exercise the things which you've learned, doing some mission trips, stuff like that, and then other resources to help sustain the strength of the church. And then number 3, start. So how do we start churches? We'll start with strong churches, churches that know how to sustain strength. That's what we need. We don't need to be planting weak churches, churches that are mismanaged and fumbling around in the dark lane. Those churches don't get started anyways. But I have written some of those. But what we want to start are strong churches that are sustaining strength, improving that strength. So we need to be strategic in what we do. We need to be making connections, and we need to be equipping. And all of this is connected back to the local church, your church, and how your church can participate in those things. So that is basically very quick, in a nutshell, those 3 levels. So the SBC, ACSB, and Southeast Kansas Baptist Association. You guys have questions or comments of interest?
So how are the voting rights distributed?
And yeah, that's a really good question. So at the national level, every church is given 12 messengers that they can send regarding the size. Yes. And then I think beyond that, it is connected to cooperative giving, how much churches is giving to the cooperative program. Which some people have mixed feelings about that. But I think it's understandable that if your church is giving $1 million to the cooperative program, you might get a few extra months to vote. It's pretty impactful, that kind of money. I think it's a relative number, and they try to make it as fair as possible. Now, do churches send the maximum number? Some do, but most don't. Most of our churches don't send anyone. I know locally, most of our churches don't send anyone. And I would love to see that change.
You said there's 47,000 churches, you only have 13,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could have 600,000.
It could be gigantic.
I had 12. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be massive.
So they give an agenda before the convention, they say what they're kind of going to vote on and stuff?
Some of that does get communicated. I wish they would change some of how they do that, because some of it is kind of last minute, and there's been some push to try to get that out in advance. They do the best that they can.
Yeah.
And they do give some deadlines to somebody trying to make a resolution or something. It does get printed, it is handed out to everybody at the convention. I would like to see it a couple weeks in advance, would be much better.
Well, I was thinking, if I remember correctly, but grown up, if I remember, that it depended on what the topic was, what's going to be voted on, depending on how many more people went, because they want to make sure their vote got counted, that's what it's
Yeah.
for people there.
Right. Yeah, well, controversy usually draws crowds,
Oh, yeah.
right? So, which is unfortunate.
What is isn't there a deadline date for registering?
There is, yeah, for registering as a,
Do they have a convention every other year or every year?
it's every year in June.
I mean, they have to have a deadline, and they have to know how many people are coming and how much space they have available.
They do, and I'm not sure what that date is that they have.
Like they had it in New Orleans, and had 13,000, how many people could have been there in that space?
Yeah, well, there was actually more than 13,000 people that were there. That was just registered guests. So there was probably more like 20,000. There's people bring their kids and other things, but they're not passengers. There's media that's there. There's thousands more.
Did they have it at Superdome?
No, it was at the convention center down by the river. Massive, massive rooms. There's screens everywhere that you feel like you're not
Actually,
a
there.
mile away, you look, you're a mile away from the stage. And how that kind of operates too, if you've never been to one. They have microphones placed in different places, so when they go to make resolutions, you go to microphone 4, press the little button, gives them a pops on the screen, like what's the question, or there's a point of order, or something like that. And that's how they try to manage it. And again, you can imagine trying to get 13,000 people in a timely manner, say what they want to say, and what they should say. You just run out of time. You just run out of time.
Is there still talk of becoming a Great Commission church convention instead of Southern Baptist?
That has been something that's in Nashville. I know there's one that was brought up, but
It wasn't
it
discussed seriously.
didn't really gain any traction.
I'd like the motion.
There was a push for that back in like 2010. There's a book right now talks about that, and kind of the push for changing the name and changing some strategies and all that nature. But it has been gained popularity across the nation.
Some people really stuck with tradition, whether it's good or bad. Yes, well, change for change's sake. Yeah. And then, the recent controversy about sexual abuse and such, I don't really understand it since it's not about, really about, it doesn't have any authority over churches. Why is it their responsibility? I mean, how are they to be involved in that in some way? Is there a database where you can keep track of that everywhere? I don't understand why. You enter the media, it's bad, or they don't have any idea what SBC is like.
Yeah, which goes back to the.
All media should go through this discussion.
Do what?
All media, go into convention, should have this discussion.
And that's part of the problem with media, is that they have this lens that they're looking at the convention with, thinking that, oh, it's a hierarchy, that's how it works. That's not at all how it works. So whenever they put something out in an article, news broadcast, they're slanting it with their opinion of how this should actually work. And they don't understand how the first part works. So they're trying to use solutions on the back end, but they don't understand the front end. So the sexual abuse issue, again, there's mixed reviews and emotions connected to all of that. The SBC, again, is made up of autonomous local churches. So the SBC as an organization has no authority over what happens in those churches. All we're doing is collectively say, with the abuse issue, say, this is the problem in our churches, we need to fix it. Now, when the SBC hands something down to the local church has to do it. No. All the SBC can do is say, hey, we put some committees together, some teams together, we put money toward this because at the convention, we're saying, yes, we want to put money toward fighting this problem. So they form a team, task force, they fight against it, put some stuff out, and then launch that to the local church. Does the local church have to do it? No, they don't. Now,
I'm not talking about authority, if SBC in general have any mechanism that they were neglecting in some way. Or
Well, that's been the
it was a
accusation.
database of
Yeah.
potential vendors.
That's been one of the accusations against the SBC. But again, that's coming from a mindset of literally
Right,
hiring.
they reflect the guy in church.
Yeah,
There.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so what the SBC has put out has been, last year and this year, they put together a database. The first database was pretty crude in how it was formed because they put that together based upon any known abuse that was connected to a church. They didn't have to be Baptist, but it was just was the person that was part of a Methodist church, or pastor at an independent Baptist church. And they just pile it together. Now, that's been coming through a little bit, and they put together a different website that is a lot more user-friendly, accessible, and you can go to it and look things up on there. And there's also helps that they've worked on and produced. But also Church Forward, in Nebraska, has been working on this as well. And they put together a toolbox for five levels, I guess, or five. Whether it be the pastor in the situation, the church member in the situation, the accused in the situation, the abused in this situation. They put together a toolbox for us to use. And again, that's one of those things that at the national level, it's been funded, a lot of money's been given to it. At the state level, there isn't any money spent. Like, it's just volunteer time to put that together. And Joel Pryor is pastor in Topeka, First Baptist Topeka, and he is kind of the team lead on that. And he was quite passionate about helping churches, helping the abused. I'm talking to him a couple times about things.
I have a heart for this because I had a girl come to see me for years ago. Her twin sister was taken off and by their youth and was raped and killed. She escaped out the door, but her twin sister escaped. And so it was the only reason they like to let her come to my parents would let her come to my youth versus high school. So it really has to be done.
Yeah. And so with that, one thing that we are doing on the 29th of this month is a ministry safe training over in Pittsburgh at Trinity Baptist Church. And it's free to our churches. We're having another DOM from Nebraska come down and use their household to lead that 9 to noon on the 29th, that training. It's something that wasn't happening at the camp, the training that we now have. That's something that's going to be going forward. Is abuse training for all of our volunteers, all of our workers that go to the camp, they have to do the training first. So if you haven't had any kind of abuse training or abuse awareness training, please go on the 29th. If you can't make it on that, you would be, we'll get you connected to great resources. I have 4 kids, 14, 7, and it's just angers me. When I hear these things in the news, and I know these things happen all the time, and there's things that we can do as churches to prevent this. And a lot of our churches are operating in ignorance, and we need to expel the ignorance. Because the abusers, they're not ignorant. They know. They know how to manipulate, they know how to work the system. And if our churches get trained, they can't do that. Any other final thoughts, questions? I don't know what your guys' schedule is supposed to be.
No.
You're done, we're leaving.
Okay. file claims. Okay, mind if I pray? Father, I thank you for who you are. You are the God of all things. You sent your Son to tear down the dividing wall that was once there. And it's through your Son. And what a miraculous and restoring event that was on the cross. Also what a horrendous, terrible thing it was. Thank you for what you've accomplished, you've done, and restoration has been made with us personally. So God, I do pray for this church. I pray for their cooperation with each other. Pray for their cooperation with the pastors. Pray for their health and their strength. That they would be a shining example of what Christianity looks like. And, how that plays itself out day to day, moment by moment, life here in the ocean. God, would you grant them the grace that they need to be courageous in witness, to be motivated by the passions that you give them. God, would you equip them in areas that maybe they didn't never even consider. We thank you again for what you have accomplished, what you are accomplishing, and what you will accomplish. And pray this right now. Amen.
So where's the next year?
Maybe I will make plans.
Indianapolis.
I
So
don't know if we should.
it's only about 9 hours instead of 13.
Well, I finished the other quilt.